Well, hello and welcome into Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast, week 25 power rankings episode. I am Brandon. That is Michael.
Well, hello.
We do this week in, week out. We give our top 10 power rankings and a little nuggets here and there as we go on. Welcome in. If this is your first time joining us, we ask that you hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have you join the crew, be a bunch of barrelheads here at Barrels and Barrels, a bourbon and baseball podcast. This is strictly baseball this week, as it is our power rankings brought to you by 10th Mountain Whiskey and Spirit Company. You can go use promo code BNB for 10% off your order. You can get 10% off your whiskey, 10% off glassware. They've got some cool shirts, polo, as well as what's it called? A flannel?
Yeah, flannel.
Flannel. I just got one. Yeah, I need to get that washed and ready to go. But go ahead on over to 10thwhiskey.com. Use promo code BNB, and that'll get you 10% off your order. So let's jump right into it this week. Michael Burns, 2 weeks to go in the regular season.
Oh, man.
We're in crunch time. Yeah, sad stuff. But the playoffs is when things
It's
really start to
exciting,
get
but
exciting.
sad.
It's bittersweet.
Depends
for sure.
depends who your team is.
Yes, especially with how things are going with the Cubs this week. My number 10 team this week, dropping down another spot in my top 10. The Seattle Mariners are my number 10 team this week. 2-4 this past week. They lost. They got swept by the Dodgers. They went 2-4 versus the Angels and the Dodgers overall. Still have a pretty good run differential. Just I wonder if they peaked too early back in August. 81-68. They are currently not in the playoffs, I don't believe. Are they? I think they are just behind the Texas Rangers for the final spot in that AL wildcard race right now. So they are my number 10 team. Mikey, where you got your number 10 team?
Number 10, I got a new team into the top 10. Not because they had an amazing week necessarily. They had a good week. I think the other two teams that were fighting for the spot had atrocious weeks and don't deserve to be part of our top 10 here. And so my number 10 team is the Minnesota Twins. They had a winning week facing Tampa Bay. They got a win out of them. Went to the White Sox, took care of business, and that's what you're supposed to do, is beat the crappy teams. And they did this week. 4 games, series against the White Sox. They won 3 of them. The Twins just don't scare me, though. Their hitters, Carlos Correa, looking like thankful that some teams didn't pay $300 million for the guy. The starting rotation didn't have a too terrible of a week, but nothing overpowering. Sonny Gray, Dallas Keuchel, Pablo Lopez, nothing that terrifies me too much. How about you, Brandon, for number 9?
Number 9 is those Minnesota Twins, 6-4 in their last 10. They're up 2 spots. This might be the first time this year that I've had them in my top 10. They go from 11th to 9th, consistently giving you a winning week here or there. They're winning games, 4 games versus the White Sox. They won 3 out of the 4. Their run differential continues to get better as well. It's at plus 90. A couple of weeks ago, I believe that was closer to 0. I think that at one point, no team in the AL Central had a positive run differential, and that's changed as Minnesota's really kind of taken a stranglehold on that division. They actually have the 8th best record in the second half at 34-25, 79-71 now. They've got a stranglehold. I said it in last week's podcast that they have clinched this division basically because of how bad the rest of the division has been, and they've kind of taken the reins and gone on. Their pitching is probably the best part of their team in my mind. They're 11th in scoring this year. But you throw out, excuse me, you throw out Lopez, Joe Ryan, and Sonny Gray, and you got a pretty good 3-headed monster there in a 3-game series.
Yeah, the Twins were one of the only teams here in the top 10 that had a double-digit positive run differential. We'll just throw that out there.
A double-digit this past week?
Yes. So you're talking about their
Who's
finally...
your number 9 team?
Number 9, I've got the Seattle Mariners. Their starting pitcher getting it done. The offense kind of lacked a little bit this week, except for J-Rod. J-Rod's still hitting like 400 for this last week. But not the whole rotation got done. Wu, Castillo, Gilbert. Who am I missing? Kirby. Yep, and Bryce Miller. That's a 5-headed monster right there. You just mentioned the Twins, 3-headed monster. It's a 5-headed monster right there in Seattle.
Yeah, one thing is Seattle does have to make the playoffs because they're not going to have the Well, right now that division's up for grabs, and we'll continue to talk about that here as we move on. So your number 8-9 team was the Seattle Mariners. My number 18 is a team just ahead of them in the wild card race as well, the Toronto Blue Jays, who had kind of a Heckle and Jive week.
Yes.
Dr. Heckle, Mr. Yeah, whatever it is called. The Toronto Blue Jays, they went 3-4. I'm tired, I'm hungover. 3-4 here over the last week. They got swept in a 4-game series by the Texas Rangers. Not good. And then they went on and swept the Boston Red Sox. Pretty good to move on. And they continue to look like one of the better teams in the AL wildcard race, despite getting... And they didn't just get swept. They got demolished in that 4-game series at Texas. But then Texas just went ahead and got swept by Cleveland in the final weekend of or final series of the week. So these teams are kind of all over the place. Toronto has been the most consistent, I think, over the last couple of weeks out of those 3 teams, Toronto, Seattle, and Texas. So Toronto is my number 8 team this week, up 2 spots from number 10.
Number 8, I've got the Philadelphia Phillies staying same spot as they were last week for me. The offense still looks like the Philadelphia Philly offense. Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, Bryce Harper's coming around again still. But this last week, the starting rotation struggled a little bit. Taijuan Walker, 12.1 innings pitched, 10 earned runs, four walks to 8 Ks. Aaron Nola was bad. So the starting rotation needs to get hot. Maybe they're saving it as they have a comfortable 3.5 game lead. That could vanish in one bad week, as we saw you just talked about with the Toronto Blue Jays facing, not Toronto Blue Jays, Toronto Blue Jays.
Texas
Texas. Yeah. That was 3 games right there.
Yep.
So Philly hoping that pitching comes back around and they get hot like they did last year, rolling into the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's who my number 7 team is the Philadelphia Phillies, staying in the same spot I had them last week. They had a 4-game series versus Atlanta, really didn't get the job done at all. You would have hoped to get at least 2 out of the 4. They lost 3 out of 4, and the Braves clinched versus the Phillies earlier this year, clinched the division earlier this week. Phillies have that offense. The run differential isn't quite as strong as where it's been at 72. They're still scoring runs, 9th in the league, and they've been okay in the second half. I'd say they've been consistent. They haven't been consistently great outside of that stretch in August when they were scoring every run via home run, but a very good team that has the potential and the talent. If they make the playoffs, they're likely to make the playoffs, to make potentially a deep run if they can get past the Atlanta Braves. So my number 7 team, the Philadelphia Phillies. Who's your 7?
7, I've got the Toronto Blue Jays. All I gotta say about them, additional that you didn't say, was they could have put Texas away. Could have put them away. Mm-hmm. Instead, they did the complete opposite. Kept them right there. I'm sure Seattle's pissed that they did that and let Texas get those 4 games.
And my 6th team is a team that should have been able to take advantage of Texas losing this past weekend and the Seattle Mariners having a rough week. But the Houston Astros, in 6 for me this week, had a piss-poor week against the 2 worst teams in baseball, Oakland and KC. They only won 2 out of the 6. They went 1-2 in each series. And I believe those games were in Houston, were they not? I believe it was at home.
I believe so.
In the home ballpark. 84-66, still good enough to lead that division over the Texas Rangers by a game and a half, really. But this is the closest divisional race between 3 teams. We're going to continue to watch, but right now it's the Houston Astros, and none of these teams are playing their best baseball right now. So it's going to come down to the final 2 weeks of the season. Houston faces Baltimore, a team that just clinched, so maybe there's a letdown there. And then they face that same Kansas City team. It's in Houston this weekend, so that means this past week was in KC. But still, you've got to win 2 out of 3 versus those teams. They've still got one of the better run differentials in baseball. Only one of 5 teams with only one of 6 teams, with a plus 123 or higher, and that's them. And that's 6th spot for me. Who's your 6th team?
Yeah, 6th spot. I'm in the same spot as you are. I've got the Houston Astros dropping a spot for me from 5 to 6. I'm not concerned. All these guys, these are veteran guys. They know how to play playoff games. Framber's still looking all right. JV still looking all right. I think they're just one series. Maybe this next week, like you said, Kind of a letdown. This is what they need to get the fire under the butts and get rolling, get ready for October.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, especially for that AL West. So the Houston Astros, both are number 6 team, down a spot from last week. As we jump into number 5, the team, before we get there, I do want to ask, if you haven't done it already and you like what you're seeing so far, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Hit that little bell button as well, and it'll send you notifications anytime we do send out a video. We've got 2 separate YouTube channels. This one, at Barrels and Barrels Pod. This is our baseball channel, and if you're a fan of bourbon as well, go check out BNB Bourbon on YouTube. That is our bourbon page where you can find bourbon reviews and bourbon hunting videos, and maybe a cool video from Kentucky Bourbon Fest this past week if that's something that's up your alley. So my number 5 team, the Milwaukee Brewers, jumping up a spot. They continuously win series. It seems like for the last month at least, they've won every damn series, and the one time that they haven't, the Cubs couldn't take advantage. Milwaukee 84-65. Now they're almost 20 games above 500. Remember when nobody was trying to win that division as well? Now they're really taking off. They're still not the best run differential, and they have a hard time scoring. Still the 19th most runs in baseball. That's the lower half of the league. But in the second half, 35-23, and they're beating teams left and right. So the Milwaukee Brewers, a top 5 team in my power rankings now.
Yeah, I've got the Milwaukee Brewers in the same spot. Just this week, they had a positive 19 run differential. Brendan Woodruff, 15 innings pitched, 1 earned run, which was a solo home run, 13
and that's
strikeouts.
Going to be your player of the week, I bet.
13 strikeouts to 1 walk. And the thing about their offense suddenly is it's not Christian Yelich getting it done. It's not Joey Weimer or Carlos Santana. It's Kyle Frelick, William Contreras, Tyrone Taylor, and Willie Adames. All this past week hitting about above 300. Take that back on that last one. Willie Adames is not. But the top 3, they're all hitting above 333.
Sal Frelick has been insane.
Yeah, if they could get their veterans like Christian Yelich coming around, Victor Caratini is the backup catcher. He's at the bottom of the ranking here. But the Brewers suddenly, like you said, coming out of nowhere, owning the division, 20 games over 500. If that's a real 300 monster of Woodruff, Burns, and Peralta if they're all right.
Yeah, and if they could score 2 runs for them, they may get the win, because that's just how good that pitching staff is, and that bullpen is airtight as well. Number 4 for me, the same team it was last week. They didn't have the best week, but the Los Angeles Dodgers go on, and they did beat the Seattle Mariners, swept them this weekend. So 3-0 versus the Mariners, but they lost 2 out of 3 in a rivalry series versus the Padres. Still, you go 4-2 on the week. You've won 3 in a row, 91 wins. Only 4 teams that have that mark so far this year. 91-57. There's your number 4 team. They do have the second highest most runs scored, but their pitching staff hasn't been as good as the other 3 ahead of them in the top 5. So the Los Angeles Dodgers, my number 4 team.
Number 4 for me, the Los Angeles Dodgers. Positive 8 run differential on the week. You like to see from the rotation, Clayton Kershaw, I think, is their current ace right now.
Mm-hmm. Who else do they have? That's the question.
Right. Lance Lynn, Bobby Miller, and Ryan Petit, and Gavin Stone all got starts this week. All gave up runs with the exception of Kershaw, who only went 4 innings, but only gave up 2 hits. So he was lights out in those 4 innings.
Yeah, that pitching staff does not scare me going into the playoffs, and that would be why if I was able to choose the rank, like the spot that I got as a seed, I'd want the 3 or the 6 seed in the NL right now, because you've got a much better chance at making it to the NLCS, and who knows when you get there what can happen. We've seen in years past the best team doesn't necessarily always win those series and go on to the World Series and sometimes win it. Think about the Florida Marlins. They've done that a couple of times, even though the Phillies last year, right? They made it there, and they were the number 6 seed going into the playoffs. So you never know what you can do if you get in, especially if you can come against this Dodgers team. That pitching staff isn't too scary, but they're still my number 4 team. They're Mikey's number 4 team. And I'm number 3 team. I have the Tampa Bay Rays staying pat. If you would have asked me 2 days ago, they would have been a little higher up. But they lost 2 in a row to the Baltimore Orioles. After having a great start to the week, they were 4-1 heading into your Saturday and Sunday play this weekend. But 4-3 on the week. They've lost 2 in a row, losing to that top team. They had a chance to steal the division away from Baltimore this weekend, and they just couldn't get the job done. They've got an easier task on their first series this week. They're facing the Angels. Then they face the Toronto Blue Jays, who are going to have a little chip on their shoulder trying to get back into the playoffs as well. But Tampa has been a team that continuously defies our thoughts.
Yes, I think ever since we trashed their name when McClanahan went down, they've done nothing but win.
Yeah, since McClanahan got hurt and the Wander Franco thing, they've really grouped together and put together some of their best baseball of the year, and that's saying something because they started the year 100-0 to start off, like the first
right.
But they won 11 in a row or 12 in a row
14.
to start the season,
or maybe
was it 14 as much? So yeah, Tampa Bay, my third team.
Yeah, I'm right there with you at Tampa Bay. They're now 9 games ahead in that first wild card spot. Oops, excuse me. Wild card spot.
All choked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seemed like, like you just said, we thought they were going to be falling out of a playoff spot, and the Blue Jays would steal it from them. I think they're pretty secure in a playoff spot now, and just kind of need to get ready, or maybe they want to finesse their schedule to see what they want to get. I think they have too much of a lead to do that, but yeah, Blue Jays, my number 3 team. Not Blue Jays, Tampa Bay.
It's late. It's Sunday. It's both been a week. As far as our top 2, we're going to get to that here in a second. Again, if you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, asked to do that. Welcome to Barrels and Barrels of Bourbon and Baseball podcast. We hope you've liked what you've seen so far, despite some of the old audio slip-ups and Brandon losing his voice here over there at number 9. But we're looking at number 2 in this week's Power Rankings, for me at least. The Baltimore Orioles, they just clinched their first playoff appearance since 2016. They are 2 games ahead of the Tampa Bay Rays with 2 weeks to play. So maybe they don't have that letdown against the Astros because they're still playing for the division. But if you saw the party in that clubhouse when the GM is doing the dong bong that's a beer bong, not something else. And that's what they call it. Just letting you know. So don't get mad at me, YouTube.
Careful Googling that.
Yeah, be careful Googling that. And don't listen to this at work. 93-56 on the season. The best team in the AL. They're the first team in the AL to make it to 90 wins. And they have the best record in the AL at 93-56. They didn't have the best week, but hey, they held pat versus Tampa Bay and still hold that lead.
Right. I've got Baltimore at number 2 spot as well. They did call up Heston Kjerstad, their number 3 overall prospect. He was the 2nd overall pick in 2020. Maybe trying to get a little step in their step. He graded pretty well as about an average hitter with a little bit above average power. Overall grade about 55 for you those who know your prospect grades. So a little above average all around.
You're not bad.
Yeah. I will note that Jackson Holliday is batting about 256, 396, 385 in AAA. So he's having his first hiccup. And if he came up right now, I think it would be an even bigger surprise. But a little letdown there of Jackson Holliday, not just killing everything else, killing AAA like he has everything else to get the call for this playoff run.
Yeah, you've been pushing for him for a while, and we've been pushing this number 1 team for weeks. They continue to look like the best team in baseball. They had a hiccup this weekend after going 3-4 versus the Phillies and clinching the division. They haven't won a game since. They lost to the Marlins 3 games in a row as they the Marlins swept them this past weekend. And was that series in Atlanta or was that in Miami?
It was in Miami.
It was in Miami. So the Marlins getting the job done there. Seemed like there were a lot of sweeps in one way or one direction or the other. Teams that needed to win or teams that couldn't afford to get swept got swept this week. Or some teams did both. If you think about the Blue Jays and the Rangers. So a lot of action, but the Braves get swept this week. But still, they have a 3-game lead over the Baltimore Orioles for the best record in baseball, 96-53, with 2 weeks left to play. No doubt they're going to hit the 100-win mark, 219-run differential. Scoring is the best in the league by a long shot, just about 30 more runs than that team in L.A. that we had ranked at number 4. But the Atlanta Braves, my number 1 team, and I'm assuming that's where you're at as well.
Yep, number 1, Atlanta Braves. That series against the Marlins. The Marlins outscored them 36-13. So the
And
Braves
that hasn't
just
been done by a Braves team all year.
right. I do feel good. Strider was not part of this series. I don't believe. I think he had a good week pitching.
Hmm.
Kyle Wright's back. He did pitch earlier in the week, so his second start comes Monday. Second start back from injury. Kyle Wright back.
That'll be today.
His
Yeah.
his first start was 3 innings pitched, 6 hits, 6 earned runs, 2 walks, or 3 strikeouts.
But
So,
he's coming back after being out for a long time.
and they're not counting on him.
Right. So get him right potentially, and you've got an additional arm that just makes this team even scary. He won 20 games last year, didn't he?
Yeah, he was a bona fide ace last year.
Well, that has been it for this week's Top 10 Power Rankings 1 through 10, which you can find here, and also brought to you by 10th Mountain Whiskey and Spirit Company. Don't forget to go use promo code BNB for 10% off your order. That is anything. We're talking whiskey, T-shirts, or even glassware. They sell bitters and even other types of cocktail mixes and other types of alcohol. They've got gin. I think they've got a fantastic brandy as well.
You can get your whole
if that's up
Christmas
your alley.
list done on 10th Mountain Whiskey.
Yeah, Michael already bought his entire family all the 10th Mountain Whiskey stuff. So go check that out, 10thwhiskey.com. Use promo code BNB in all capitals. And in all capitals, I'm going to give you my top 30 power rankings, as I do every week. I call it the honorable mentions, but we're going to run through it. A new team back in dead last. That's the Oakland A's. 29, the Kansas City Royals. The Chicago White Sox continue to piss down their leg. They're at 28, the 27th team. For me, the Colorado Rockies kind of had a resurgent week, 5-2, taking series versus the Cubs and the Giants this week. Washington Nationals 26, number 25 for me, St. Louis. LA Angels continue to fall down. They just lost their best player and the best player in the league for the rest of the year. I'm just going to say the Los Angeles Shoheis are down in 24th. 24 was LA. In 23, the Pittsburgh Pirates. 22, New York Mets. 21, Cleveland Guardians. In 20th, the San Diego Padres. Detroit Tigers at 19. Boston Red Sox. Bad week. They're down to 18. San Francisco 17. The New York Yankees having a little bit of a resurgence. A little too late. But, hey, carry that momentum into next year potentially. They're at 16. Cincinnati Reds up 1-15. Miami Marlins holding pat with a split week after getting pummeled by the Milwaukee Brewers. They go on and sweep the best team in the league. They're at 14. Texas Rangers in 13. The Cubs, which could continue to tumble down this top 20 power rankings, they're down to 12 for me out of the top 10. They're the biggest falling team for me, down 4 spots. And I'm a Cubs fan. And then number 11, the team that has really been their daddy in the last week and a half, the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Right.
Any thoughts?
I've got the Cubs in the same spot. One note for Arizona. Gallen's been their ace for the year, but a guy that they were kind of counting on for this year who had a bad first half, second half, Brandon Pfaadt, has really come around in the second half. The first half, he had a 9.82 ERA. Second half, he's cut it over in half, 4.18. Doesn't sound amazing, but he's been getting the job done here of late, especially in September and August.
Yeah, and Merrill Kelly's been a good arm for that team for most of the year as well. And for all those who don't know, tiebreakers this year are different. It's not if you tied, you play a tie game breaker, just like the Cubs and the Milwaukee Brewers did in 2018. No, there are tiebreakers instead, and it's head-to-head. And right now, every team in the wild card race has the tiebreaker over the Cubs. So if you're a Cubs fan, can't look too good right now, but still 2 weeks left to play, and that's why you play out 162 games, and it's not 148 games, because if it was, we'd be finishing the season at this point. So that wraps it up. That would be the end, and we'd be in by a half game. That wraps it up for this week's episode of Barrels and Barrels, a Bourbon and Baseball podcast Power Rankings edition brought to you by 10th Mountain Whiskey and Spirit Company. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more whiskey and weather content. Whiskey and weather. Boy, it has been a week. I talked about whiskey weather a lot this weekend, so it's on the tip of my tongue. Whiskey and baseball content, bourbon and baseball content. We're on YouTube here at Barrels and Barrels Pod. And if you like our bourbon content, that is at BNB Bourbon on YouTube as well, so go follow that. Follow Michael Burns on Instagram. You can see his handle there above his head. I am whiskey_weather on Instagram. You can also find our podcast at Barrels and Barrels Pod on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Any last words, Mr. Michael Burns? Mr. Burns.
Mr. Protects. No, just 2 words. Let's go.